The Negian Empire's energy cannons could vaporize a man in a microsecond. But that didn't stop the laughter of Supreme Commander Wezen and his bridge crew as they mocked humanity's primitive combustion guns over the comlink. "Your chemical propellant firearms are no match for our technology. Earth will submit to the Negian Empire or be destroyed," Wezen declared smugly to the grizzled visage of General Joshua Thompson, leader of Earth's defense forces. But the old soldier simply smiled and said, "Try us, bring your troops and fight us hand-to-hand, gun-to-gun if you think we're so weak. Let's see if your fancy armor can stop good old-fashioned lead." This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. When the massive alien dreadnought took up orbit, bristling with weaponry that could crack the planet in half, humanity expected to be awed, not sneered at with derision. The Nigians saw humans as a primitive backwards race, barely worth a footnote in their galactic empire. "Your unconditional surrender is expected," Wezen had announced. Joshua stared at the monstrous warship hovering over the blue marble of Earth. A new capitulation would mean the end of freedom for his species. So he threw the dice on a desperate gambit, a challenge of personal combat. "Send your troops to meet us outside Washington, D.C., the general offered, buying time. "If your soldiers can defeat us, we will surrender." He was gambling the future of 8 billion souls, that human grit and guts could match alien technology. Wezen grinned at the audacity, razor teeth flashing, and accepted. His soldiers were veterans of 100 conquests, armed with disintegration rays and unbreakable nanomesh armor. They would enjoy teaching the uppity primates a lesson before enslaving them. He was briefly puzzled when the human asked, "Would you like brass or lead?" but dismissed it as some native idiom and closed the channel. The fate of humanity would be decided by the courage and skill of a few, armed only with combustion guns, against the most powerful warriors in the galaxy. If they failed, Earth would fall. But if they could do the impossible and win... The Negian dropship descended on a pillar of blue-white plasma, scorching the grass of the National Mall as it landed, its ramp lowered with a metallic hiss, disgorging 100 towering super-soldiers clad in gilded power armor and armed with devastating plasma rifles. The aliens strode forward, with the arrogant swagger of those who had never known defeat, not even bothering to take cover behind the sculptures and monuments dotting the park. Why should they? Their armor rendered them all but invulnerable to the primitive weapons of the humans. General Joshua Thompson led a small unit of soldiers to meet the invaders, deliberately armed only with standard M16 assault rifles rather than the advanced prototypes hidden away in secret bases. As the Nigians emerged from their dropship, the human soldiers took cover behind concrete barriers and the stone walls of nearby buildings, training their weapons on the gleaming behemoths. The Negian commander, his golden armor lavishly engraved with alien heraldry, barked laughter at the sight. "Throw down your weapons, primates, and surrender. You cannot hope to pierce our armor with your primitive ballistic firearms." Joshua's only response was a calm, "Fire at will." The human soldiers opened up on the Nigians, the sharp crack of rifles echoing across the mall. To the utter shock of the aliens, the supposedly harmless human weapons punched fist-sized holes clean through their prized power armor like it was tissue paper. A dozen Nigian soldiers dropped in sprays of yellow blood before they could even react, their armor sparking and flickering as tungsten core rounds tore through shielding and reinforced alloy. Caught by surprise, the remaining Nigians attempted to return fire with their plasma rifles, but more human soldiers poured out from the surrounding buildings, flanking the sluggish aliens and tearing into them with concentrated fire. The Nigian energy rifles were devastating when they hit, reducing men and concrete to ash, but the unwieldy weapons were ill-suited for close-quarters combat against mobile, cover-seeking humans. Panicked radio chatter from the Nigian commander, back to his orbiting mothership, revealed the truth. The humans were firing advanced armor-piercing rounds with cores of ultra-dense tungsten, a material so hard that it could defeat even Nigian energy shielding when accelerated to high velocities. The arrogant aliens had fatally underestimated human weaponry. In a matter of minutes, the once gleaming Nigian soldiers were reduced to shattered wrecks, blown apart by withering rifle fire and wallowing in pools of yellow blood as the human soldiers secured the area. The few survivors were swiftly captured. Joshua had the corpse of the Nigean commander dragged before him, the alien's ornate armor pitted and torn. The old general pointedly ejected a spent rifle cartridge onto the dead alien's chest and looked up as a camera drone zoomed in, broadcasting his image to Supreme Commander Weezon still in orbit. "Well, Weezon, looks like you chose lead," Joshua drawled, his voice hard. He held up one of the tungsten cord rounds, the metal gleaming. "You still sure you want to try conquering Earth?" Weezon's reptilian eyes flashed with fury as he watched the live feed from Earth, the broken bodies of his elite soldiers strewn across the National Mall. Enraged by the humiliating defeat dealt by the supposedly primitive humans, he snarled orders to his fleet. Moments later, the Nigean warships unleashed a devastating orbital bombardment on Washington, D.C., columns of searing plasma reducing much of the city to molten slag and ash. But even as the once proud capital burned, Joshua and the bulk of his soldiers were already retreating to a secret complex of reinforced bunkers deep beneath the Appalachian Mountains, built decades ago for just such a contingency. As the thunderous bombardment finally ceased, the grizzled general met with his officers in the stark concrete command center. "The Nigeans will be coming in force now," Joshua stated grimly. "But this is our home turf. We've been preparing for this." He gestured to a holographic map of the region, showing a sprawling network of underground bases and tunnels. "We have thousands of soldiers spread throughout these complexes, all heavily armed and well supplied for a prolonged guerrilla campaign. Let the bastards come. We'll bleed them dry in these mountains." Even as Joshua spoke, Nigean dropships were disgorging columns of power-armored infantry and floating tanks into the smoldering ruins of Washington. Weezon, determined to utterly crush the humans' resistance, had committed a sizable portion of his invasion force to the region. The alien soldiers, used to relying on overwhelming technological might and orbital supremacy to easily conquer primitive worlds, marched into the Appalachians expecting a swift victory. They could not have been more wrong. The human defenders, intimately familiar with the forested terrain, laid vicious ambushes for the overconfident Nigeans. Strike teams burst from concealed tunnel entrances to unleash devastating rocket and machine gun fire on the aliens before vanishing back into their subterranean lairs. The Nigeans' advanced sensors were of little use in the dense foliage, while their bulky armor and cumbersome plasma rifles proved ill-suited for fighting a mobile guerrilla foe in close confines. In one particularly brutal engagement, a Nigean armored column was advancing up a narrow mountain valley when human soldiers suddenly opened fire from camouflaged pillboxes on the ridgelines to either side. The aliens were trapped in a killing field, their desperate return fire failing to hit the entrenched humans. Rockets streaked from the trees to tear open the Nigean tanks like tin cans, while precision sniper fire from high-powered rifles punched through officers' helmets with contemptuous ease. In a matter of minutes, the once formidable column had been reduced to a burning ruin, stretching the length of the valley, the few survivors frantically calling for extraction. Such scenes were repeating throughout the Appalachians as the Nigean advance slowed to a crawl, stymied by tenacious human resistance at every turn. Weezon could only watch in mounting frustration as casualty reports flooded in, the brutally effective human tactics negating the Nigeans' every technological advantage. To make matters worse, the Galactic Council chose that moment to contact Weezon directly. The assembled alien representatives, who had been monitoring the invasion, expressed their grave concerns over the humans' shocking combat prowess. Fearful of how the primitive species might react to learning of the wider galactic community's existence, they ordered the Supreme Commander to immediately cease hostilities and withdraw his forces from Earth. Weezon slammed a clawed fist onto his command console, scales rippling with impotent rage. To be forced to retreat by a bunch of hairless apes armed with chemical-firing slug-throwers, the humiliation was unbearable, but the Council's word was law. Seething, he had no choice but to relay the orders to his battered troops, instructing them to fall back to their landing zones for evacuation. On Earth, Joshua received word of the sudden Nigean retreat with grim satisfaction. The hard-won respite would give his soldiers a chance to regroup and resupply for the battles ahead, for he knew this was far from over. The Nigeans might be withdrawing for now, but they would undoubtedly return with even greater numbers and fiercer determination to put humanity in its place. The grizzled general turned to his officers, his lined face set with determination. "We hurt them today, hurt them badly, showed them the indomitable spirit of humanity, that we won't roll over for any alien invader, no matter how advanced. But this is only the beginning. We need to prepare, fortify, because they'll be back. And we'll be waiting, ready to give them another taste of good old human tenacity. We didn't start this war, but by God we'll finish it." Supreme Commander Weazen seethed with impotent rage as he watched his forces being routed by the supposedly primitive humans. The shame of being outwitted and outfought by these hairless apes was simply too much for the proud Nigen to bear. When the Galactic Council ordered him to withdraw, it was the final insult. Weazen slammed an armored fist into the command console, his eyes blazing. "I will not retreat," he snarled to his shocked subordinates. "I will not let it be said that the mighty Nigian Empire was bested by a bunch of savages wielding chemical firearms. We will crush their resistance and grind them under our heel, no matter the cost." In a desperate gamble to salvage victory from the jaws of defeat, Weazen gathered his elite personal guard, the finest warriors in the Nigian military. Armed with the best weapons and armor the Empire could provide, they would accompany their leader on a lightning raid to decapitate the human resistance once and for all. Nigen drones had managed to locate the humans' main command bunker, buried deep beneath the Appalachian Mountains. Weazen's plan was simple: land directly on top of the facility, blast their way in, and slaughter the human leadership before they could react. Without their command structure, the primitives' resistance would surely collapse. The pride of the Nigian forces crammed into orbital drop pods, their weapons charged and ready. At Weazen's signal, dozens of the pods streaked down from the mothership towards the forested mountains below. They smashed through trees and slammed into the earth, hatches blasting open to disgorge the elite warriors. They leapt into action without even waiting for the pods to settle, charging towards the bunker entrance with plasma blades flaring. Caught completely off guard, the human guards had no chance. Weazen himself led the charge, his huge form encased in elaborate powered armor. His plasma sword scythed left and right, eviscerating men before they could even raise their weapons. Tungsten rounds sparked off his armor as a few guards managed to fire back, but the projectiles might as well have been spitballs for all the effect they had. Nigen rifle fire flashed as they stormed down the corridors, the searing plasma bolts incinerating anyone foolish enough to stand in their way. Alarms blared and emergency lights flashed as the aliens rampaged through the facility towards the command center, leaving utter carnage in their wake. In the command center, General Joshua Thompson had been poring over tactical maps with his officers when the alarms sounded. He looked up sharply as a bloodied private burst into the room. "Sir, we're under attack. It's the Nigeans. They're inside the perimeter." The young man gasped out before a plasma bolt took him in the back, flames erupting from his chest. He collapsed to reveal a hulking Nigean warrior, rifles smoking, eyes glowing with merciless intent. "Arm yourselves," Joshua roared, diving for a rifle rack along the wall. His officers scrambled to do the same as more Nigeans poured into the room, plasma bolts and grenades laying waste to consoles and equipment. The human commanders fought back with the skill and courage of seasoned veterans, taking cover and laying down accurate fire. Tungsten rounds tore into alien armor and flesh, sending Nigean after Nigean crashing to the floor in sprays of yellow ichor. But the Nigeans were the finest warriors of the Empire, and they did not fall easily. Plasma swords flashed and rifles thundered, cutting down humans with brutal efficiency. Joshua ducked under a swing from a Nigean blade and put a burst of fire into the alien's throat, blasting away his armor and sending him choking to the ground. "Hold them back," the general urged his men, inspiring them by example as his rifle clove a path of destruction through the Nigen ranks. Though outnumbered and outgunned, the human officers refused to give an inch, making the aliens pay in blood for every step they took. In the chaos and smoke of the battle, Joshua suddenly found himself face to face with Weezon himself. The Nigean commander towered over the human, his gilded armor splattered with human blood, his eyes alight with cruel amusement. "Your species dies today, primate," Weezon sneered, leveling his plasma rifle at Joshua's head. But the general was not so easily defeated. His rifle snapped up, and he fired from the hip, blasting the alien's weapon from his hands. Weezon roared in fury and lunged forward, plasma sword extending from his gauntlet with a hiss. Joshua met the larger alien with the butt of his rifle, blocking the downward slash of the sword. The two leaders traded blows in the center of the room, plasma blade clashing against rifle stock, raw strength pitted against human tenacity. At first, Weezon's sheer size and speed drove the human back. His plasma blade flickered like lightning, nearly taking Joshua's head off, and his armored fists rained down hammer blows. But the general was a veteran of many battles, and he refused to succumb. He ducked and weaved, avoiding the worst of the alien's attacks, landing strikes of his own when he could. The duel raged back and forth across the room as the battle swirled around them, human and Nigean locked in mortal combat. Joshua took a glancing blow to the temple that sent him reeling, blood streaming down his face, but he surged back with a roar and smashed his rifle butt into Weezon's faceplate, shattering one of the glowing eyes. The Nigean commander staggered back, momentarily stunned, and Joshua pressed his advantage. Rifle swinging like a club, he battered the alien back step by step, the impacts denting and cracking Weezon's armor. The alien rallied and lashed out with his plasma blade, but Joshua knocked it aside and lunged inside his guard. With a final Herculean effort, the bloodied human general brought his rifle crashing down on Weezon's head, directly on the shattered faceplate. There was a sickening crunch, and the towering alien went limp, toppling backwards to lie still on the deck, yellow blood pooling beneath his cracked skull. With the fall of their leader, the remaining Nigeans swiftly lost heart. The last few elite warriors were overwhelmed by the humans' numbers and ferocity, cut down in a final hail of tungsten rounds as Joshua's men secured the room. As the last shot echoed away, a shaken calm descended. Joshua leaned heavily on the command console, exhaustion in every line of his battered form, but a fiery light still blazed in his eyes. He looked around at the carnage, the bodies of both human and Nigean littering the room, and then raised his head to stare directly into the lens of the command bunker's communications array. "Nigean Fleet, this is General Joshua Thompson of Earth," he declared in a voice rough with pain and fatigue, but ringing with iron authority. "Your commander is dead. Your invasion has failed. Humanity remains unconquered. You will leave our world immediately and carry this message to the rest of the galaxy. Do not underestimate our resolve. Do not mistake our restraint for weakness. If you threaten our freedom, we will fight you to the last man, and we will win. Now go, before we change our minds and really show you what we're capable of." There was a pregnant pause, then a crackle of static as the response came. The voice on the other end was cowed and subdued, a far cry from the arrogant tones of before. "Understood, General. The Nigean Empire accedes to your demands. We will depart Earth orbit at once and relay your message. There will be no further hostilities." True to their word, the Nigean fleet began to pull back, their massive ships turning ponderously away from the blue-white marble of Earth. On the planet's surface, the remnants of the invasion force hastily withdrew, abandoning their shattered vehicles and equipment in their rush to evacuate. And on the Galactic Council's capital world, the assembled alien dignitaries watched in stunned silence as the recordings from Weezon's failed assault played out. A species they had dismissed as primitive savages had just soundly defeated one of the most powerful militaries in the known galaxy. Using technology and tactics the Council races had long abandoned as obsolete. The implications were staggering. The balance of power on a galactic scale had just been upended by the unprecedented victory of a race nobody had taken seriously. As the councillors began to argue and shout, each voicing their shock and dismay, one question hung heavy in the air. What did the rise of humanity mean for the future of the galaxy? Merci beaucoup, sir. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.